Call this little meeting to order, and I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This is a very special meeting. It says so right on my paper of the Sacramento, the Port of West Sacramento. And so I'd like you to please stand and join us. I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney, a closed session. We did hold a closed session. What is there to report, if anything?
The Port Commission did meet in closed session to discuss real property negotiations. No action was taken.
All right. Thank you very much. Item 1, of course, is an opportunity for members of the public to present on items that are not otherwise on the agenda. Is there any? I do have 2 requests to speak on item 3. Is there anyone that has an item to raise that's not otherwise on the agenda this evening? Seeing no request to speak, consent is to approve the minutes from January 9th.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. We'll go to item 3. This is a Port Business Plan Workshop and consideration of authorization to release a request for interest for the Port's North Terminal property. Mr. Toft.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight's the 4th and final business plan workshop with the Commission before staff presents a final business plan for the Commission's consideration on February 20th. And I want to start tonight with kind of a summary of what took place last night. Over at the Community Center, we held a community forum on the Port Business Plan. Mr. Chairman was there for the entire evening, was attended by about 50 folks who spent 2 hours there. We had about a 45-minute staff presentation followed by a Q&A period. On the dais, we did supply you with an overview of the attendees and the questions and comments. And to briefly summarize here, the questions and comments we've grouped into 4 main groups: labor, the rice industry, the general public, and the media. And their questions, comments were primarily focused on channel deepening, the container barge service, cargo volumes and revenue, labor jurisdiction, and potential operating models. So before I move on, I'll pause at this point and ask the Commission if they have any questions or comments on that meeting last night.
I have a comment. I was there last night. I was impressed with the turnout, the number of folks that were there, and also the array of different interests that were there. So there's quite a bit of interest in our little port. But I would be remiss if I didn't especially acknowledge the good work done by our staff, Mr. Toft, Aaron, Laurel, and Phil Wright, and Mr. Lucan, and of course Marty Tuttle. I thought it was an excellent presentation. It was very informative, and I thought it was understandable, and it did provoke quite a bit of comment and conversation. So I want my other commissioners to know that our staff did a very good job last night. I'm very proud of our organization.
Very good. Thank you. There we go. So moving on to the business plan, as we've demonstrated and talked about at the 3 previous workshops, the primary goal of the business plan is to transition the port to a new operating model that brings financial sustainability, positions the port to better serve the city and the regional economy, and to provide jobs. The current terminal management agreement with SSA does not really provide an incentive to grow the port's cargo base. It leaves the port exposed to significant market risk. does not provide guaranteed revenue, and leaves significant operational responsibility and cost with the port. So we have undertaken an administrative cost reduction effort. It's only so far we can go with that given our current contractual obligations per the SSA agreement. So we're currently in negotiations, or I would say preliminary discussions, we're not at the negotiation point yet, with SSA to modify their agreement and to shift, the goal being to shift costs and risks away from the port. But given the uncertain outcome of those negotiations, tonight staff is recommending that the Commission authorize a request for interest, or RFI, that would generate interest in the port facilities, identify potential interested parties and their qualifications, as well as their specific facility interests, and help define the parameters for a potential future request for proposal, or RFP. So looking at the North Terminal, we have carved it up into 4 component pieces, which really are separate and can be standalone facilities. And so I'll describe those here briefly. First, the large area in yellow, the break bulk and container barge facility. That also includes our wharves and piers, the transit sheds. That's where we handle the bagged rice. The orange area, the general bulk facility. The small red area is the bulk grain facility, and finally the green area off to the right is the bulk rice facility. So when we think about operating models, there are really 2 basic options, and that is a master agreement that would cover all of the facilities on the North Terminal, or individual agreements. And at the last Commission meeting, the Commission asked staff some good questions about the likelihood of success and the complexities involved with those 2 different models. And I'll explain what we think we know about those 2 models at this point. So a master agreement covering all the facilities would certainly be simpler. We know that master operators are rare. There are not too many port examples where a master lease exists. And a master operator is not likely to control the range of cargoes that these separate facilities are designed for, and therefore may be less successful in maximizing the utility and value of those component facilities. On the other hand, a separate lessee arrangement would certainly be more complicated and would require that the port maintain berthing rights and access corridors for all the tenants, but it would also likely result in specialized operators who actually control cargo and who would be more likely to maximize the utility and value of the component facilities. So the RFI process is designed to attract all of those potential players and to maximize the range of operating options for the port. So this matrix shows the 4 component facilities that I just described across the top, and on the left are 6 contract types, which are really variations on 2 primary contract types, those being a management agreement or a lease. And these options also include the option of selling facilities to a private operator while maintaining the ownership of the underlying land. So the yeses and nos are port staff's initial thoughts on what types of contracts would be allowable for each facility type, and I won't get into those all right now, but I'm happy to answer questions at the end on those. So looking ahead, not to get too far out in front of the commission on this, but time is of the essence, so staff's already initiated some effort here. We're in discussions with SSA. We've established contact with other interested parties. We have a mailing list that would be used to mail out the RFI. We've completed the draft RFI document. We're prepared to release that no later than February 1st, allowing for a 2-week response period. We'd have those responses in by February 15th, and we'd be able to present the results of those responses, a summary of those responses together with a status update on the SSA negotiations to the Commission on February 20th. And at that point, the Commission could choose to proceed with the formal RFP or perhaps enter directly into negotiations with one or more parties. So I'll finish with a reiteration of the business plan schedule and turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, are there questions from the commission? Yes?
Yeah, can you get us a copy right now of the draft RFI?
Tomorrow, I could forward it to you. I don't have a hard copy with me at the
Do we
moment.
get them? I mean, this is obviously a very significant step for the commission, and I'm comfortable voting to release an RFI, the scope and details of which I haven't seen. And I don't want to delay it till the next meeting, but if it's...
The basics of the RFI are outlined in the staff report. There's a series of bullet points on page 2 that kind of summarize the content of the RFI. It's a fairly short and simple document.
So we cannot access the computer system to print 5 copies out, or?
We might be able to pull that off. It's a little rough. It's a draft. There's an appendix that we have to complete, and there's some maps and descriptions that have to be inserted. But the basic text and the matrix are already laid out. Yes.
Yeah. But this, just in general. So this is unlike contracting for doing slurry seal on the roads or something like that, whereas standard public sector contracting, where we know just about as much as the contractor about the work that's to be performed, its scope, all the rules, all the potential things that can happen. This is not that case. You know, in the contracting literature, this is a very, very severe case of information asymmetry. We don't know much about the folks, which we will learn from this, but the ultimate design of what this will look like will have to reflect that we know next relative to the potential bidders, we know very little about the market, the risks, all the other conditions. That means the design of the arrangement has to really shift a great deal of the risk and the accountability and incentives onto the contractor. So at every step of the way, you know, I'm going to be pushing on this because I think this is a serious option that we're pursuing. This is not a parry to SSA to say, you know, come negotiate with us more because we might possibly do this. This is a very serious option, but it's going to have to be designed in the context of how asymmetric that information level is. And so we need to be very cognizant at each step of the process about what is being conveyed in terms of the potential shape, and the RFA is the first step in doing that.
Oh, don't disagree with any of that, yes. And I assume that Aaron's off to...
Aaron is
off to make
he's
a
going to
copy
print it out and
now.
make
I
copies
think
right now.
someone's dashing to do that, so that's...
And then we'll make copies of it also available to the public if would like to take a look at it
Good
today.
idea. Mark? Yes.
Yeah, just maybe to backstop that a little bit. You know, one of the issues we have as a port is in the middle of a residential area, and we're always dealing with how you have an operational port and the compatibility with the city. And you know, there's goals that the city has, at least in terms of greening and that type of thing. So would it be relevant to put in a request for interest that, you know, the city is pursuing a green port? I don't know if potential interest might wane or be expanded if they know that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, our thought on the RFI was really to keep it broad and flexible at the RFI point, evaluate those responses. We're not obligated to pursue any of those options, but those types of issues would certainly be outlined in a future RFP. So we would use the RFI to gather market intel, to structure the RFP in accordance with what the market wants, but we would certainly include what we want in that document as well.
Well,
But
may I-
we may not go to an RFP though, right? So if through this process we say this particular RFI submittal is one that we're excited about, we want to proceed to negotiations, you know, having let the world of potential interest folks know that we have defined our port in this way, you know, fundamental to our mission is that we're going to be a green port, seems like an appropriate thing to do. That so to signal to them that if you know if you have background, if you have qualifications and background and success in this area, tell us about it, right? It seems like that would be a useful thing for them and for us to be clear about the context that Commissioner Johannesson just referenced, because it is central to our mission.
Very good.
No, it's fine, because, I mean, I think we're kind of into new territory here for ourselves, and so it is important to clear it up. Walk me through, then, a scenario, if you can, of what this might look like. So we send out a request for interest of what? Interest? Are you interested in, so World, are you interested in a master, basically, we're asking who's interested in doing any or all of these things on the list, master management agreement, which is, I think is essentially what we have with SSA now. Is that correct?
Yeah, what we have with SSA now is a master management agreement without a minimum guarantee of revenue. So we would, what we're looking for is a guarantee of revenue. But so.
But we're looking to see who's interested in any or all of these.
Correct.
What's the level of interest in the marketplace to do business with us on, I would assume, any of these models or whatever we haven't thought about? I mean, who knows? Maybe somebody wants to come buy it. I don't know.
Right. So this is important, the map and the description and the depiction of the different component facilities to put out there to the market to see you know, the specific players that might be interested in the bulk rice facility or the bulk grain facility or the break bulk facility, to give us that range of potential respondents from a master lessee to a party that was interested only in one of those component facilities.
Okay. So and I'm going to kind of backing up to the mayor's question here, his point, because I think it's fundamental to what we're ultimately going to be able to do there. So there are opportunities here for people in the industry to do certain kinds of businesses, and if we create this, if we can create the right business arrangement, it could be good for them and then good for us in the sense, I think, especially that the port, that the city and the port, the commission, the district here gets out of the risk business. We get into some revenue stream business to do other things we need to do. But all along, we've said, and I think it should be said, that we have certain expectations of compatibility with our community. I mean, from everything including we want to see the kind of work that is good for our workforce, that is good for our local economy, and is compatible with our community as far as environmental and inconvenience and that sort of thing. And it seems to me at some point in this process, our expectations on those are actually constraints maybe, but our expectations about how this thing is to be done need to be clear, because we're going to be asking somebody to take risk in exchange for giving us something back. But I mean, I don't want to set up, I'll say it this way, I don't want to set up a situation where we contract out with Bob's port management company, and he comes back and he says, oh, I've got to run, you know, I've got to create a rendering factory there or else I can't make this work. I mean, the constraints that we have or the expectations we have as a community need to be kind of up front in whatever solicitation we're putting out there for people to respond to. I guess that's what I'm trying to, I assume that's what the mayor's driving at as well. Otherwise, we're all fooling ourselves. They'll come in, they'll say, well, we can do it, but we have to do it in an objectionable way, and that's a defeating endeavor for us.
And just to be fair to them, right? I mean, if they come back and say, we think there's a great market for rendering plants, and we want to build 20 of them at the port, and we say, well, that's just not acceptable. If we can say that in advance, then the potential respondents can focus on the area, on the strategies that are as closely aligned as they can be with our basic, principles that govern how we want the port to operate.
Chair.
Yes.
So along those lines, so that's perfect segue. So along those lines, you're not going to get, or you're not expecting to get that kind of detailed information in an RFI, right? That is the next level. That is the RFP level at which you would solicit more specifically a competitive application that would more fully detail or vet the way in which they would potentially make it successful, right? I mean, you're not going to get that. I don't think you're going to get that level of detail. You can state that as sort of these are non-starters, but I don't know.
I guess what I was saying is that if you're Bob's port rendering company, then maybe you just don't respond at all, right? Or if you're Bob's rendering and longshoring of renewable energy, then you focus on the longshoring of renewable energy and not on the rendering in your response to the request to the RFI. Not that, and then because the staff report indicates, and I think it's correct, as we don't know, that we may not go to an RFP stage, that we need the RFI to be as both descriptive and on target as it can be from the outset. While recognizing that you're absolutely right, I think that they're not going to, you're right, they won't be coming back and say we want to do this, and that specifically, but they will tell us different things about themselves based on how that aligns with what our interests might be.
Hopefully, yeah.
If they're smart.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
We're on
Help us.
we're on schedule for coming back to the commission at a special meeting on February 20th with the business plan. Our thought on the RFI is it's an opportunity for us to do more outreach and be able to come back not just with a business plan, but also sort of reality check from the business folks whether or not the different operating models have any validity in terms of interest, so that we can bring that back. We're not thinking that we're going to make a decision on a particular proposal. So between now and February 20th, we would craft that business plan. It definitely has to include the community vision for the port, but we'd also be able to say we have also some real interest in the port. And then prior to launching into the next RFP process, we would now have business folks who are interested in aspects of the port. It would also include the real estate holdings. Rick is focused on the North Terminal, but also in here we'd have the real estate holdings. What we've seen in other examples on RFIs is that prior to the RFP, we convene a meeting of those who are interested, and we talk about the RFP process. There may be an opportunity for some of these folks to joint venture, who did not know each other before, but were brought together because of their interest in the port. We have the meeting. We might see a joint venture opportunity where just not a single company would bid on the port, but hey, we could combine with complementary interest, and we might see a joint venture to an RFP. So it's just, I think, an opportunity to make best use of that time while we are wrapping up the business plan, giving Aaron and Rick a little additional input so that when we come back on February 20th, we'd have the response to this RFI. But no decisions prior to that.
I don't hear we're making decisions at all, but I think what we're all saying is that it's a balance here between getting the word out there. I mean, in some ways, we're fishing out there in the market, saying, who's interested in coming over here and playing with us. But that has to be balanced against some realities that we think are real for us, which are there are constraints that are real as well. I certainly don't want to get. I mean, I want this to work, and I don't want to get to a situation where we have somebody that's interested and they say, well, as the mayor suggested, I get into it and say, no, I've got to have unlimited authority to do whatever I want, whenever, however, and. You said you want, I'm taking all the risk, and so I have to do everything I can, or I get to do anything I want to make this port successful. You're going to get your check at the end of the month. Well, obviously, we don't want that, and we need to put that general message out there in some fashion relatively soon in the process, so folks appreciate that, and they may not be interested then. I mean, I don't know how far you go with that specificity, but there are some constraints here. I assume that most of the people in the industry know a lot about this, but we ought not ignore that. I mean, this is a relationship we have to go into with our new partner, perhaps, but eyes wide open. Obvious. I mean, I'm not telling you not doing your job at all. You're doing a great job, but that's what I'm concerned about, is that they come in and say, oh, I didn't realize that, you know. Mike McGowan lives too close to the port. He's going to call us every night. They need to know that up front.
That you live close to the port?
Well, I can't sleep at
No,
night. I worry about you all night long, Oscar. Keep you awake at
But I
night.
do think it's important to know, albeit, I mean, I agree, I don't want to get the kinds of proposals that we're going to say, these are non-starters, we're not going to go down this path. But that's good information to have. I mean, I think if at some point we realize that is the only viable, or that is the only interest that we're getting, or things that are just not compatible with where we want to go, and we're so far off base that there's no reconciling that. That's good information to have. I mean, I don't want to dismiss it. I agree with it. I just don't want to completely dismiss it.
Right. But I mean, it's like, you know, or even on eHarmony, you're going to put something on their profile, right? Some description of who you are, what you're looking for. Doesn't mean that if somebody responds back, you're not going to look, but you're putting something,
right.
some contours out there.
Your high school graduation
So that other folks can put their best face on too.
Sure.
And folks that, you know, they just specialize in, you know, coal-fired power plants, maybe say, okay, this isn't the one for me.
Yeah.
And let's save them some time and us some time and get some focus. So, but I mean, I think most of these can be conveyed in the RFI or in the accompanying documents as, you know, these are the kinds of objectives that we have. So we're not saying everything must be renewable, but we have an objective to be a green port. Not everything has to, you know, use longshoremen to move it from one space to the other. But our objective, you know, one of our objectives is to keep faith with our, you know, with the partners, our labor partners that we have been working with and that have been supportive of and have been supported by the port over time. Right. So that should be clear that we don't intend just to be an automated port that, you know, where stuff's just going through and it's not contributing to the local economy in any way. That those sort of dimensions and contours are helpful both for us in the front end and I think for potential respondents to say, okay, this is the personality of port that is before they launch into it.
Mark, you have something else?
Just maybe a quick question on the RFI itself. What does the distribution of that look like? Are we getting out to you know, a good representative group of potential parties that might be interested in? I mean, how expansive is this going to be distributed?
Well, it's a relatively finite list. I would say we have a mailing list of 30 parties, but we kind of expect those parties to pass along the information. So, you know, the marine industry is fairly quaint. So, it would be, I would put the initial mail out at, you know, of core players that we know of at about 30, but we're also going to be looking to the rice industry, for example, and their mailing lists and those types of vehicles to spread the word.
Would you use trade journals or things of that nature?
Perhaps. I mean, on the RFI, we have a pretty tight time frame, so there's not a lot of opportunity for advertising the RFI with that type of a turnaround, but certainly we would do that with the RFP. We're looking more at kind of an email blast to the players that we know about and we think that are relevant, and just kind of working the phones and doing the best we can with outreach.
And are they just in this country or are they worldwide?
Well, I mean, some of them are international players, but I would say they're, you know, the ones that I'm thinking of are U.S. based for the most part. Yeah.
It seems that if there are some synergies between other players, they may not be specifically in the U.S. now, that, you know, you'd want to make sure this opportunity is at least considered or broadcast to that group.
Right, and the nature of the business is international, so the word will get out.
All right, so where are we, gentlemen? Pardon? Public comment. All right. Any other questions? All right, thanks, Rick. We'll try to refine this before we're done. I have two requests to speak. Tim Campbell, Jr. Oh, okay. Derek? Nothing to say? That's all the cards I had. Anybody else? Okay. I think the mayor had to step out for a second. So, Mr. CEO, having heard all that, do you have a recommendation as to how you want to proceed on this?
Well, I do think we could provide additional information in the RFI that talks about the port goals, the background of the port in the middle of the community, its notion of being green and global, and augment that. We also met with MIRAD in Washington, D.C. last week. We mentioned this process. They were very interested in helping us get the word out so that we can move beyond our group of 30 and go, as Commissioner Johannesson said, more of a global basis on that. We could add that information. We could run it by the chair if that was so desired, to make sure that we've got it consistent with the commission's thought process. I don't see a downside to this. I do understand the notion of sending the wrong message and not the right vision out, but I think we've got enough material that we could augment and maintain this schedule so that on February 20th we could give you a report back on a level of interest. And if it falls short, then I think we'd probably want to take that into account as we release the RFP, if that is the wish of the commission.
All right. Any response to that? Welcoming Mr. Christoph as a alternate here. Good to see you, sir. Okay. What do you need on us? Some action for this, or?
Yes, this was an action item in terms of giving us direction to proceed with an RFI.
So the request is to proceed with an RFI and attempting certainly to embrace the recommendations, suggestions, and the words of wisdom from the commission. All right. Is there a motion? Such a motion? Mark?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? Hearing none, it's unanimously passed. We're moving forward. Rick, good job. Where'd he go? Good job. Yeah. Like herding cats. All right, that's all we have on our regular agenda. Anything further? Michael, you boy? No, sir. All right. Lawyer, anything else? No, sir. All right, we're out of here. Thank you very much.
Can I just
Oh, yes.
The port director mentioned, but Mr. Lucan and Mr. Tuttle and I were in D.C. last week, and among we met variously with the White House, with MARAD, with several members of Congress and the Army Corps of Engineers, the staff of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and Senator Feinstein's staff, the Senate's Public Works Committee, about a variety of issues, but including channel deepening, both the deepening itself, but also the maintenance dredging issue that we have with receiving inadequate federal funds to adequately just maintain the channel at the depth through its full geometry that it is today. Marty and Mr. Tuttle and Mr. Lucan met with the Corps, and they were asked to provide additional background on a dredge material management plan. So there's responsiveness, understanding on that issue. They are trying to deal with the overall challenges around deepening projects across the country, the lack of both funding and an appropriate process for how to do those in the absence of earmarks. But yeah, it was a positive set of meetings, but we didn't really have an expectation on the deepening project that we would come back with $150 million, and we didn't. But you know, we're trying to keep the project, even though there's not a live opportunity for a large appropriation at this moment. We want to keep it on the radar screen and on the attention band of the key policymakers in D.C., and then if we can, to try to attack at least the maintenance dredging issue, so we're not losing ground.
And that was a question of some interest last night at the community hearing, and I'm glad for you to give that report, because we try to convey the message that it's not for lack of trying. Certainly it's a high priority for this port to get it deepened, and a considerable amount of time, energy, and expense has gone into trying to keep this on track. That the mayor didn't mention is that he also had a personal conversation with Secretary LaHood on this and some other issues, and so that's it's about as good as you can ask for, is to have that access and that recognition, and reminding folks that Secretary LaHood was out here. It was on another issue, but previously. So we keep banging on it, and hopefully one of these days we'll get her done. So.
And the only thing I'd point out is that, in the conversation I had with the White House on the topic of the deepening, and acknowledged that the challenge that they're facing with the East Coast ports all needing to dredge now as a result of the opening of the widening of the Panama Canal and the much larger number and size of ships that are calling on those ports. The response back was, yes, it's a problem, but not as bad as you think, because most of the East Coast ports are relying on their private partners for their deepening projects, not on the federal appropriations process. So as we look at this, as we proceed with the process that we just talked about, the deepening needs to be at least a part of that, of the conversations and the work and the negotiations that we're having with potential partners, as opposed to simply thinking about someday the federal government will swoop in with $200 million and solve all of our problems, because that's not a near-term possibility.
Mr. Chairman, there was actually one item of significance to report to the Commission. Since the last meeting, last regular meeting, we had a situation where, with our operations and maintenance dredging, where due to a bid protest with the Army Corps of Engineers, the Army Corps was not able to complete a very small amount of regular O&M dredging that we had this year. As a result of that, we had to work very closely with the U.S. Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers to address one spot of concern down in the Rio Vista area. We worked with our member of Congress, Doris Matsui's office, and others, and what we did is we were able to actually go out with the Army Corps and resound that area, and luckily it resulted in a need to not have to do any dredging this year. So we were very lucky in that respect, that we didn't have to do any maintenance dredging this year with this bid protest. But what it also means is that money from this year can be carried over into next year's cycle, so that's also a benefit to the port in terms of O&M dredging.
So that means the money should be there next year should we need to dredge?
Yes, because it's a multi-year agreement, they're able to carry it over versus other contracts, they're not normally allowed to do that.
Anything further? With that, then, we stand adjourned.